Ready to go live?
Okay.
Ready.
Okay.
Okay, everyone, we're on.
Welcome everybody to Tanya in Daily Living at Mind Israel. So for those of you who haven't been in this class before, we're up to Perek of Tanya. This is a special class that was started in honor of Leora, and we continue learning tests. We're up to Perek. And it's a class that's open to children. There's actually no children today, but it's a class that's open to all children, so mothers can come and learn together with their children, and their children could subconsciously incorporate the lessons and the spiritual ideas that are spoken about here, and make it a part of their consciousness. So it's interesting because that's definitely a part of what we're going to be talking about today in Perek. And Perek, I feel like we've been referencing to all throughout, because Perek is when we start getting really into the details of what this means. Up until now, the Alter Rebbe has been laying the groundwork. It's kind of been like the foundation of what's happening here. We had a question: how can a Yid serve Hashem truly? How is it easy for him to really be fully given over to Hashem? And we spoke about Kikar V'Lecha Dever Ma'ayit, that it is something that is close to you in order to serve Hashem with love and with fear, and to serve Him always. And the Alter Rebbe said, if that's something that you want to understand, come with me on this journey. Let's try to understand what we're really talking about. And he went into a deep dive into what is the makeup of a Jewish person. And we spoke about the neshama, and we spoke about the 10 spheres of the neshama, and how there are two operating forces inside of every single human being: the nefesh elokis and the nefesh bahamis, the godly soul and the animal soul, and how both of them, these operating systems, are kind of vying for control over us. And we spoke about the characteristics of the nefesh bahamis and the characteristics of the nefesh elokis, and how they're extreme opposites. The nefesh bahamis is self-centered. He's shallow. He doesn't want to acknowledge Hashem, right? He wants to just do what is gratifying for him, as opposed to the nefesh elokis, who has depth, wants to understand further, wants to acknowledge that there's something more than just something that's surface level. It's altruistic. It will do something for not just for its own gain, but for a higher purpose. And it's not self-centered. There's also this very, very basic difference that I know I highlight every single time, but I think it's really important to think about. The nefesh bahamis is in a constant state of anxiety, and the nefesh elokis is in a constant state of calm, because of the previous two characteristics, right? So the nefesh bahamis is surface level. Things don't have explanations. It's just surface level. Whatever I see is what I get. And that's really scary, because there's no explanation or reasoning or higher understanding of what's happening in this world, as opposed to the nefesh elokis, who is plumbing the depths, can see Hashem, can see that there's a meaning and understanding in this world. And so therefore it's in a state of calm, because it sees God, as opposed to the nefesh bahamis, which doesn't see that. It sees itself. So those two operating forces are constantly vying for our attention and vying for control over our body. And Perek is when the Alter Rebbe really starts talking about the battle between these two forces. What are these two operating systems really doing, and what is the struggle that you're experiencing? So the first thing to really understand about what's happening here is that this is a battlefield. We are a living battlefield, and it's happening what do you say? A battlefield. A battlefield, yeah, where there's a battle. There's a battle happening constantly, and it's a very intense fight between these two operating systems. Now, just before we even get into the fights, what if I'm not experiencing that unsettled feeling of experiencing a constant battlefield? So some of us can relate to that, some of us cannot. Some people, I remember in seminary, this one woman that I was together with in seminary, she was saying, you don't understand me, because I have a different nefesh bahamis than you. My nefesh bahamis is constantly fighting. Your nefesh bahamis is like a little shepsala. It listens to whatever the nefesh elokis says, and it's like very easygoing. Mine is not. Mine's like a raging bull. And I remember hearing those words, and I was like, so how, is that true? Does it really work like that? Is it easier? Is it harder? Are there different types of nefesh bahamises? And it sparked a lot of interesting conversation, definitely, where I was in my notes. But the point is that if someone is not feeling as much of a struggle, it might not be that they have um, overtaken their nefesh Bahamas and they're totally ruled by the nefesh Elokis. Instead, their nefesh Bahamas has an entirely different way of expressing itself. It's much more subtle. It's much more calm in its way of expressing itself. It's not fiery and burning and passionate, but it's still just a nefesh Bahamas. And I'll give you an example of those two different types of nefesh Bahamas in a minute. But something to also consider is if I'm not feeling that I'm in the midst of a battlefield, it could also be that there is a sense of surrender, right? That there has been just a surrendering to one side. And probably for most of us, it's been a surrender to the Nefesh Bahamas side. And if that's happening, then we want to access or rather analyze the battle. Why is that happening? Why have I surrendered? Why have I given up? Is there something inside of me that maybe just doesn't want to engage because it's really scary and intense all the time? Is it maybe that I just feel like I'm doing the right thing and I'm just going to stay with that and I don't want to think about it too much, right? Is there like a mindlessness happening where I'm just kind of floating through life, trying to do my best, but not being super conscious about it? So Perek test brings up a lot of personal questions. It's finally getting out of the theory of what's happening in our lives, right? That there's a God in the world and we want to be serving him and these mitzvahs. And now it's getting really practical. Like, where is the battlefield happening inside of you? Where do your passions lie? What are your pitfalls? How are we going to help you overcome them? Who's really in charge of your body? Okay, so we just dove right into it. Let's talk a little bit about the Nefesh Bahamas because the Alter Rebbe talks a little bit where the Nefesh Bahamas is, where the Nefesh Elokis is, and then we'll talk about how to make this really practical. So the Alter Rebbe talks about the Nefesh Bahamas and says that the Nefesh Bahamas is seated in the heart. And he speaks about the Nefesh Elokis and he says that the Nefesh Elokis is seated in the mind, in the brain. And from there pervades the body. So the Nefesh Bahamas is in the heart, right? The heart is the seat of passion, emotion. It's more subjective. And the Nefesh Elokis is seated in the mind, and from there also connects to the rest of the body. And the mind is considered more objective, more distant, having the ability to be to step outside of a situation as opposed to being passionate or very stuck in the situation. And that's where the difference already begins in the way that they express themselves. Okay, so let's talk about the mindlessness for a second, because I know that there's a lot of trending ideas about consciousness and subconscious. So really important to realize how the Alter Rebbe talks about the subconscious and the conscious. And is that the same as being mindless? So if a person is feeling like they are kind of just walking through life and getting things done and being as good of a Torah Jew that they can be, then that's amazing. That's great. There is an aspect that's really important for us to acknowledge for ourselves, which is the subconscious. And the subconscious means that there's a part of ourselves that has become habitualized to this part of our life. So let me give you an example. The way I eat cereal, okay, cereal milk. Some people eat cereal milk with very little milk. Some people eat cereal milk with tons of milk. Some people eat cereal milk, they leave it for 10 minutes because they like it soggy. Some people like it, crisp and crunchy. And it's a very particular thing to you. Now, on the one hand, that particularity could be dictated by, your own pure desire of how you like your cereal and milk, and you've had that since you were 9 months old and when you started eating cereal milk. Or it could be that there were different things that dictate it, right? So like, let's say you saw lots of commercials of crunchy, cookie crisp. Or let's say you had an older sister who loved when her Raisin Bran was just soaked and like you learned that that's a yummy way to eat it. There are ways, there are experiences that have happened throughout our lives that have now inculcated themselves into our experience. And now we just go ahead with that without really thinking about it. So the way that you eat your cereal, it's not a conscious thing. It's just something that you eat. If you eat cereal milk every day, then that's the way you do it. right? The way that you exercise, the way that you see food in general, the way that you dress every day, the way you have your sense of style. A lot of those things have kind of become habits. It's just a part of you. It's just the way you do things. When you walk into the supermarket, how do you shop? Do you follow a list? Do you do just row by row? Do you just go in circles? Do you talk on the phone so you distract yourself and it just like happens and suddenly your cart is full? Everyone has their own way of doing things. Now, what makes it specific to you is different from every different person. And that's something to start thinking about. There are many aspects, there are so many aspects, millions of aspects of your daily life that are dictated by just a subconsciousness, that it just flows. So you don't have to think about it because it's a lot to think about every single day, how to eat your cereal milk or how to shop in the store or how to dress. So certain things have just become ritualized. Now what happens is that that ritualization is very comfortable and it feels good. It feels safe, makes us happy, right? I know that this is the way I eat cereal and milk. I don't have to worry about it. It's comfortable. That's nefesh Bahamas. Because if something is comfortable and it's self-gratifying, it's coming from a space of nefesh Bahamas. It's not conscious anymore. Now, on the one hand, yes, it's not conscious and it's not mindful, but it's hard to make every single aspect of our life mindful. That's why Hashem created the subconscious, so we don't have to worry about certain things and they could just flow. The point I'm trying to just bring in over here is that being mindless or having a subconscious is not a bad thing. It's actually something that the Nefesh Elokis can access and use to his benefit. So, for example, when we think about chinuch from a very young age, right? So technically, when you're washing your baby's hands, nagelwasser, really technically he's not the age of chinuch yet, right? Let's say it's a baby and you want to wash the baby. He's 12 months old and you want to wash his hands nagelwasser every single day because that's something you feel like you want to do. He's not the age of chinuch. It's not like he's really learning anything or she's learning anything. But what you're doing is you're implementing something on an everyday basis. You're putting in like a space saver over there for that child's day, the 10 seconds in the morning that they are washing nagelwasser. And what happens is that child turns 2, that child turns 3, and they come to the age of chinuch. And what's happening during the age of chinuch is that you are molding them to be a person who wouldn't even think of not washing nagelwasser in the morning because that's the way they have been groomed to do, right? That's what they've been doing all their lives. There's a lot of habit building when it comes to chinuch. You're trying to make sure that that child is doing the right thing, even if they don't understand the deep meaning or the deep understanding behind nagelwasser. Child doesn't know even what tuma is. We don't really know what tuma is either. But the idea is that they're not understanding everything about it, but they're doing it because this has now become a part of their subconscious. So what you've done is you've taken the nefesh Bahamas, you've taken a part of them that is not conscious, not mindful, not really there, and you've made it a godly thing, right? You've made it a mitzvah, you've made it a part of Jewish daily living. That's beautiful, right? So what you've done is you've taken the nefesh Elokis and you've made it conquer one aspect of their everyday life that's mindless. That's tremendous. Okay, hold that thought. We're going to come back to it at the end. It's just important because I know that a lot of people are now in the space of thinking, like, what is the subconscious and mindlessness and consciousness? It's important to kind of bring that language a little bit into the Tanya to understand that this is exactly what the Alter Rebbe is talking about and more. Okay? So, how do we get our Nefesh Bahamas on board with the Nefesh Elokis? How do we start working towards creating that connection? Because it's very easy for us to feel like, well, I'm okay with who I am, or I'm okay with the way things are going. I don't really know where things are coming from. So the Alter Rebbe tells you very specifically, how are we going to get the Nefesh Elokis to be the one who is the operating system that you're functioning from? Right? Think of it as like a truck. There's only one person driving the truck. So in a Jewish person, there's 2 people who are trying to get their hands on the wheels. And there's only one wheel. And it's basically a constant fight between the one person who's going to be sitting behind that driver's seat. Is it going to be the Nefesh Elokis or is it going to be the Nefesh Bahamas? Now, it's constantly switching. So what's happening is the Nefesh Elokis is getting thrown into the back seats, into the trunk, or the Nefesh Bahamis is getting thrown into the trunk, and there's this constant battle between the two of them fighting over this driving wheel. Now, what's important to also remember is that when we are thinking with our minds, we're fully there. We're in our minds, and we can only do one thing with our minds at a time. There's only one thought that's happening at one point. Yes, there's a stream of consciousness happening all the time, but there's really just one thought that you're really holding on to. And the same thing with us as women when we're doing things with our physical bodies. You can be doing 100 things at once, but really, are you actively doing 100 things at once? No, you're really actively doing one thing at one time. So it's important to not get stressed about like, oh my goodness, is this my Nefesh Bahamis and Nefesh Elokis? What's more important to realize is right now, actively in this moment, where is this specific thing coming from? Is it coming from a mindless space that's controlled by my Nefesh Elokis? Or is it coming from a mindful place? Is it coming from my subconscious? Is it coming from a space of, this is just what's going to make me feel good? So where is this really actually coming from? So the first step is paying attention. The fact that you're here in this year right now, that we're learning Perek already means that you have a desire to pay attention, to listen in, to see what's going on. So that's the very first step. Because if you're not in the class, or you're not trying to understand yourself, or even focused on some sort of self-development, then it's very hard to work with. So first things first, you have a consciousness, an awareness of, I want to get attuned to where is this coming from. Now, the next piece that the Alter Rebbe talks about is, he says that this king, right, this king who wants to be driving the truck. In the example in the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe is talking about a king who wants to rule a country, who wants to rule a city. Here in this example, it's who's going to be driving the truck. So with Alter Rebbe's example, which is obviously a lot better, he gives a wording that's very interesting. He says the king wants to lead the residents. He wants to basically be the manhig. He wants to be the leader in that city, okay, according to the will of each inhabitant. And he also wants them to obey all of his decrees, right? And he says both of them. I can read it in Hebrew. He wants to rule over them according to his will, and that they should be that they should obey him in everything that he decrees on them. And there's a difference between the two of them, and it's a nuance, and it's an interesting nuance. He wants not just that the neshama should be convinced that the person should be convinced that what the neshama says is the right thing to do. He wants that the neshama should listen, the body should listen because the neshama said so. Right? So on the one hand, he wants the body, he wants the Nefesh Bahamis to understand, like, okay, this makes sense. The Nefesh Elokis is saying that I should do this, then I'm going to do this thing. And then the second piece is, he wants to so rule them that even if the Nefesh Bahamis can't quite understand why this makes sense, or what's the meaning behind this, he still wants the Nefesh Bahamis to be completely subservient and surrendered to him, to the king. Right? There's two different levels of being subservient. There's, okay, this makes sense to me, so I'm going to follow along with whatever it is that he or she is saying. And then there's another level of, I'm going to be completely batal and surrendered to whatever he or she is saying, even if it doesn't make sense, and I'm just going to do it. So those two levels of really being the king, of mastery over this country, that's what the Nefesh Elokis and the Nefesh Bahamis are both vying for. They want complete mastery. They don't want like a little bit here or there. They want the completeness. Just basically, the Alter Rebbe is trying to show you how much of a passionate battle is happening over here. There's no reconciliation. There's no two-state solution. There's no, I'm going to compromise here or there. Both of these operating systems are saying, I am uncompromising here in what I want. I want complete control, absolute autonomy. And that's really intense, right? So oftentimes for us, we feel like we can look at something like, let's say, I want to eat this ice cream. And you have lots of mixed feelings around it. Like, where is this coming from? Is this coming from an Nefesh Bahamis? Is this coming from an Nefesh Elokis? You can start analyzing. Okay, so part of me really wants this. It tastes good. I'm just going to eat it. A part of me is like, okay, if I eat this, I'll make a bracha and I'll be raising this ice cream to be something holy for Hashem. And there's the battlegrounds right there. There's like a battle between the two. The Nefesh B'Hamis is saying, well, I want complete ownership over this experience of eating the ice cream. So I'm going to be vying for this city completely. It's going to be pleasure that you're going to be experiencing. I'm the Nefesh B'Hamis. This is where it's coming from. This is what's going to be happening. And the Nefesh Elokis is just as loud and is saying exactly the same thing. No, I'm going to be elevating these sparks. It's coming from me. I get this action. Right? It's an intense battle that's happening at the same time. And in our conscious reality, we're thinking, okay, we're kind of like getting both. But that's not what the Alter Rebbe is saying here. The Alter Rebbe is saying here is one of them is going to be winning. Which one is it? What's happening really? Let's truly be honest about what's happening here. And again, back to like the very, very first classes, the way the Alter Rebbe talks about truth is, he says truth is Hashem or it's not Hashem. It's not about like, there's only one truth. There's only one goodness. It's Hashem or it's anything that's against Hashem or covering Hashem. So if there's something that's covering Hashem, then it's not the ultimate truth. And that's okay, right? Back to the beginning of this class, where if it's messy and you're experiencing a battleground, that's the whole point. The whole point is that we're supposed to be feeling a struggle. When we're not feeling a struggle, that's when we're supposed to be starting to get worried. But if we're experiencing a struggle, that's okay. What ultimately has the autonomy over us, that's what decides whether or not we act from a space of Nefesh Elokis or Nefesh B'Hamis. And it's hard to know because it takes a lot of consciousness, a lot of like deeply understanding myself and who I am, and a lot of honesty, tremendous amounts of honesty. At the Mashiach Suda that we had just now over Pesach, so the question that was going around the table was, if Mashiach came right now and he could give you your personal redemption, what would you ask for? And everyone was sharing different things, like what would be their personal geula that they would want to experience. And I guess because we're in the middle of this, for me, what came up spontaneously was like, if I could have my own personal geula, if I could have my own personal like turning over of something that I'm really struggling with, it would be that honesty. Like if I could be truly honest with myself, if Mashiach could come and say, I could give you this will be your personal geula, I think to me that would be tremendous, right? If I could really know and be fully and truly honest with myself about where my actions are coming from and where my actions are leading to and how I'm really deeply interacting with people. Is it coming from here? Is it coming from there? And that would be, for me, a personal geula. So let's get back to some of the other things that the Nefesh B'Hamis and Nefesh Elokis are saying. Both of them are saying, I don't want to be batal. Both of them are saying, I want complete autonomy. Both of them are saying, if you will fully identify with me, then you will stop identifying with the other. This is how complete the autonomy is. Every single detail adds like another nuance, right? If you fully identify with this belief, right, with the Nefesh Elokis, with godly reality, then you will not be identifying with your Nefesh B'Hamis at all. I want all of you. I don't want a little bit. I want all of you, the Nefesh Elokis is saying. And it's constantly saying that, right? And then the last piece that the Nefesh Elokis is constantly speaking to us is, I don't want the theory. I want this to be practical. I want to have complete autonomy, not just, where I conquer the city. I want to rule the city, right? That's the difference between theory and practically speaking what's happening here. The Nefesh Elokis is saying, I don't want to just say, I conquered you, you understand what's right, you understand that there's a God in the world, and that you should be serving him, and that you should be doing these mitzvahs. I want to rule this body, where the body is going to be functioning from that space always. Okay? And if you're feeling alarmed and like that there's a lot of pressure, that's okay. This is where the Alter Rebbe is telling us yet again that it's okay. I know that you are human, and I know that this is a struggle, but we're not going to be playing around and saying that this is not what the Nefesh Elokis wants or what the Nefesh B'Hamis wants. We have to state what is true here. And the Alter Rebbe is also saying at the same time, and it's so beautiful, again, that this is the Sefer Shel Beinanim. And there's a huge, immense trust that each and every one of us can attain that. It's not about forever, it's about in this moment. Can I, in this moment, tap into an operating system completely? Right? So, can I, when I'm giving tzedakah before I light candles for Shabbos, can I put that money in the tzedakah box entirely and completely for Hashem? That's it. Nothing else. Not because, I give to him, he'll give to me somehow, or it's important for my children to see that I give so that one day they'll give to me too and they'll take care of me, right? All of our cheshbainis that are happening all the time. If we, in a way, can let go of the cheshbainis and instead just do something entirely for Hashem, right? So let's say you're looking at that ice cream and you're saying, okay, if I'm really honest with myself, there's an admixture of a lot of feelings around this. There's a lot of nefesh habahamis. There's a lot of nefesh elokis. Can I just, for one bite, say, I'm going to let go of that, and this is really to elevate sparks, right? This is something that I'm doing mindfully and intentionally. And maybe after this, I'll check out a little bit. I will check out from being so mindful and so intentional. But in this moment, can my nefesh elokis have full autonomy over my body? That's an incredible thing, right? That's the nefesh elokis really taking control, taking the wheel in that moment. And in that moment, you're not thinking about every other aspect of your life. You're not thinking about all the other things that are luring you away from being a Torah mitzvah observing Jew. You're just thinking about, in this moment, I'm serving him. How powerful is that? That's tremendous. And that one moment can grow to many different moments throughout your day. So, the Alter Rebbe now starts going into how do I create that as a pattern, as a habit in my life, in my daily living. How do I make it that I can tap into that nefesh elokis? How can I start thinking about my nefesh elokis when I'm so set into my space of eating my cereal the way I do, shopping the way I do, parenting the way I do, even davening the way I do, because I just do it that way. This is the way I was taught. This is the way I got into a habit of doing. It has become a little bit mindless. So how do I become more mindful? So first of all, like you said, the awareness. And then the next thing the Alter Rebbe starts speaking about is you have to be aware of how you experience love. Because if you're experiencing love, the Alter Rebbe says, then you feel like there's a relationship. And what the Alter Rebbe wants us to start feeling is this is not technical, right? This is not I give him, you give me kind of relationship. It's a real relationship, a relationship of deep love and connection with Hashem. So if I could start thinking about what love looks like and how I could feel comfortable in a relationship with Hashem, and I could start growing that relationship with Hashem, then I start becoming a lot more mindful, right? So think about the relationships that you have. Let's say a relationship between a husband and a wife. When a husband and wife are living their everyday lives, there's parts of it, of course, that are like, let's say, mindless. But then it would be beautiful, not all the time, but sometimes throughout the day where you think about your husband or you think about your wife and you just know that there's something about them that you want to do something for them because you think about them. They're a part of your consciousness, right? Because you love them, you think about them. So what the Alter Rebbe is doing, dealing with a very human audience, is saying, if you have a relationship with Hashem, right? If you really feel something towards Hashem, then you're going to start thinking about him more. You'll think about him throughout your day. You'll be a little bit more conscious or mindful to his experience, to his view, to his impact on your life. So how do you start creating that love or that relationship with Hashem? So the Alter Rebbe literally says, start thinking about all the wonders that there are in this world. Look around you. Open your eyes to see what Hashem does in this world. Maybe not even specifically for you. Maybe that's too personal. Maybe that's too scary. Even just look at the world. Look at the miracle of nature. And from there, start understanding that there's a relationship here. Now, the first time I heard that personally, I I could relate to it. I could relate to that idea very much, seeing the miracle of creation. But it wasn't until a friend of mine told me this interesting story that I feel like I really more deeply understood it. So my friend was talking to her mother, and this was a time where she lives away from her mother, right? So she lives far away, and the relationship is over the phone. And she's talking to her mother, and she's catching her up, and she's relating to her, right? This is the relationship that's happening right here. And in that moment, my friend's younger siblings, who are not married yet, came home and go take care of your kids, right? The siblings right now, right? Your sisters. And my friend in that moment said she felt so loved. And she told me this story, and I was very confused because the way I see it is, if I'm the daughter who is having a relationship with my mother right now, and we're talking, and then someone comes and interrupts it, then I feel like they just took away from the love that I'm experiencing right now, the relationship that I'm experiencing right now. And she didn't see it that way. And I asked her to explain it. She said, when I heard that my mother was going to stop everything and give her undivided attention to my siblings, to me it meant that when she's on the phone with me, she gives me this undivided attention. When she was loving them, I felt loved. And it was a really interesting understanding. And to me, it was like kind of what the Alter Rebbe starts talking about here in Perek Tes, where he starts beginning this conversation of contemplation, of being mispainin on how Hashem creates this world. And when you look at the miracle of the world around you, you can too feel loved. Why? Why do you feel loved? Why does that make you feel a relationship with Hashem? It just means that he loves everybody else too. And the idea that I think the deeper understanding that to me came with that story is that understanding of Hashem deeply cares about this world. He even cares about the speck of dust, that stalk of grass, that twig on that tree, that animal in Africa that no human eye has ever laid eyes on, right? And he deeply cares about every single aspect of every single miracle that's happening in this world. And you are part of that. He loves you too. And to start really personalizing it now. Like, not just does Hashem love me in a worldly way, just like he loves the rest of the world, but he deeply loves me personally. How can I see that? And to start finding proof, right? Start finding that there is a relationship, seeing that he gives me so much. I have children. My children are healthy. I'm healthy. I have a husband. Baruch Hashem, in ways I am provided for. How am I provided for? You know, this happened to me, that happened to me. I have loving family. I have a friend who deeply cares about me. Baruch Hashem, I have certain talents that have helped me get to the place where I am. I have a job, whatever it is. All of those things, right? Those things that you could think of as like, oh, I'm happy this is working out for me. Or you could think of as, this is a gift that Hashem is giving to me personally. And the more I think about that, the more I start creating a relationship with Hashem. Seeing everything that is happening in my personal life is a gift. Yeah.
When we die and we do painting and pictures and we go to school, we are us and Hashem. So we are connected to Hashem and we have that space.
Beautiful. So it sounds like you're already engaging in that. You already have that relationship. You're deeply cognizant of the relationship. What'd you say? Until when?
No, always add and add more and more by showing and by being, trying to be connected always with Hashem. So, of course, we learn every day. We want more and more and more.
Well, it's not so, of course. Maybe it's something that you're experiencing, which is beautiful, but it's not a given to everybody. Some people have an nefesh Bahamas that are not bringing them to this shir, right? Or they're not necessarily davening every single day, right? So what I'm hearing from you is what you're already experiencing and what you're already implementing is kind of like habit building of making sure that there are parts of your day that you're constantly thinking about, Hashem. I remember one time there was a woman who told me that her husband sends her a text every day that he's thinking about her, right? He'll drop her a text, right? Oh, like, how are you? How's it going? Whatever. And then she finds out that he has an alarm to remind him that he should send her that text to check in with her. And she was so hurt. She was like, he needs a reminder, right? It was like so painful for her. And at the same time, it's not that he needs a reminder. He's putting that reminder there as a space holder to make sure that he does what he deeply wants to do, to check in with her, and to make sure that it's consistent, and to make sure that he's showing up the way he wants to show up, right? It's not like he doesn't care and he needs that, otherwise he doesn't care, right? It's that he deeply cares. So what I'm hearing from you is you're putting in space holders throughout your day. You make sure to come to shir, you make sure to daven, you make sure to do chitas. That's implementing throughout your day, that you're connecting, that you're thinking about him, that you're making his will greater than your will. That's tremendous. That's exactly what we're thinking about here. It's talking about here. It's beautiful. So I just want to get back to the difference in some personalities, right? Because our personalities really tie into all of this discussion. What kind of personality do you have? Is your personality more of a passionate person? Are you more of a rule keeper kind of person? Are you the Nefesh Bahamas who is struggling all the time and feeling that struggle? Is your Nefesh Bahamas quieter, more subtle? Your Nefesh Bahamas is happy to do the right thing. But that doesn't mean that it's coming from your Nefesh Elokis. It just means that your Nefesh Bahamas is really good about doing what is right, or doing what Hashem said, but not for Hashem, but because you don't want to feel like you're doing the wrong thing, or feel like you're not a rule follower, right? Still not coming from the right place. So, for example, some people who they're just born to be, they're happy to be followers as opposed to leaders, right? It's much easier for someone who has more of a follower personality to follow Torah mitzvahs. That was the right thing to do. That's what my parents taught me, and I'm just going to go ahead with it. It still doesn't mean that it's coming from the Nefesh Elokis. It's definitely coming from a self-gratifying place of, I just want to know that I'm a good person, right? It's about me as opposed to it being about God. In ways, that person, it's a lot harder because it's so subtle. What do you mean? I am doing the mitzvahs. I am learning Torah. I'm doing everything right. Why are you telling me that I'm not doing everything right? It's a lot deeper to start accessing within yourself. Well, where can you turn this over and be mevatel that, to experience that bittul, and make sure that it is coming from a godly space? Transform that to really be about God as opposed to be about you and how you want other people to perceive you. As opposed to, let's say, the passionate person who's going to do whatever they feel is right now. They're going to follow, they're more of a leader, let's say. I'm obviously stereotyping, but I'm going to follow what I think is the right thing to do right now, and I'm going to forge my own path. That very clearly looks like, okay, they're listening to their own voice. And at the same time, in ways, that passionate person, as soon as the Nefesh Elokis has explained to that passionate person that this is the right thing to do, then they're all for it, and the city is conquered, and not just as a conquered, it is ruled, because they have now submitted their Nefesh Bahamas that is passionate and leader-oriented to fully follow the Nefesh Elokis. So it's a lot of introspection that the Alter Rebbe is introducing here. What kind of personality do you have? What kind of voices do you listen to inside your head? What kind of belief systems do you buy into? How can we be more mindful, more conscious in our everyday life about the things that we're already doing? Is there a way that we could implement even once or twice throughout the day where we're mindful that this is for Hashem? So just a little thing that I do is I'll take something that I do all the time and attach to it a godly reality moment, right? So let's say getting into my car, turning on the car. So I get into the car all the time. So if I'm getting into the car and I'm turning it on, in that moment, can I do something that's more conscious? Instead of it being like I'm just surviving my day, can I do something that's outside of myself, something that's altruistic, something for Hashem? And that could be anything. It could be calling someone who, reaching out to someone who reached out to me and I never responded to. It could be giving tzedakah in that moment, having tzedakah box in the car and giving tzedakah, saying a Perek, whatever it is for you. Everyone has their own personal relationship with Hashem. But I find for myself that kind of like that habit building of taking something that's mindless or you don't think about, and then attaching to it something that's conscious and godly is a great way to implement throughout your daily life more of a godly reality, more of a mindful reality, more something that is conscious. Take something that you do all the time, right? And this is what the mitzvahs are literally arranged around our daily living. So you're eating. What's attached to the eating? A bracha. So that's an opportunity to be mindful and conscious. I'm making this bracha. Now let's say you can't do it with every single bracha that you make. It's amazing if you make brachas all the time. Brachas nanan is something that people are constantly struggling with. So let's say your cup of coffee in the morning, that delicious cup that you look forward to all morning, so you could sit down with that cup, right? A lot of people can relate to that. Can that cup of coffee have a bracha that's more conscious? It doesn't have to be entirely your nefesh elokis and make yourself crazy, but can it be a little bit more mindful? Or, whatever it is, let's say it's not a food. Let's say, what's another thing that we implement? Asher Yatzar. Can that Asher Yatzar be more mindful? Can you stop and say it in one spot? Is there a way that you could look at it inside? Do you have a sign outside your bathroom door that you could look at it? Could you just think about the miracle of it? Thank Hashem deeply that there's a miracle that your body functions. Things that happen throughout your day, Hashem literally implemented it, that there's opportunities for us to be conscious about it. So where can we choose one specific one and bring that consciousness into it? Okay, so that's Perek test. We didn't fully finish it, but I want to finish off with that concept because I feel like it's a big one. And yeah, I'm looking forward to 2 weeks from now. Any questions or comments or ideas? You're welcome. Okay. Have a good day.